India is not just a country. It's an emotion layered with centuries of stories, triumphs, and tears. Every stone in this land whispers something of kings and poets, of saints and warriors, creators of faith and struggle. But sometimes those whispers turn into noise. And when that happens, we must pause, not to judge, but to understand. Today, creators, I want to talk about something that has sparked both pain and reflection across our nation. The controversy around Aurangzeb's tomb and the clashes in Nagpur that followed. At first glance, creators, it might look like just another headline, another argument between communities, another social media debate filled with outrage. But beneath that surface lies something deeper. Something about who we are as a people and what kind of nation we want to be in the future. A land of many faiths, India has always been a land of contrasts, where the sound of temple bells blends with the call of the muezzin, where Ganga meets Yamuna, and where diversity isn't just accepted, it's celebrated. From the very beginning, our strength has never been in sameness. It's been in our ability to hold differences and still call it unity. But in recent years, these differences have begun to sound louder. A single spark, a statement, a rumor, or a misunderstanding spreads across the nation faster than fire. And suddenly, creators' centuries of shared existence feel fragile. The controversy around Aurangzeb's tomb is one such spark. The tomb and the tempest in May this year. The quiet town of Kuldabad in Maharashtra, home to Aurangzeb's resting place, found itself at the center of political storms. What had been, for decades, created just another historical site, suddenly became a battlefield of ideology. Videos surfaced, speeches were made, social media lit up with debates. Should Aurangzeb's tomb remain open? Creators, should it be celebrated or condemned? And once again, history, something meant to teach us, became a weapon to divide us. But let's pause and ask, what does a tomb really mean? It's a piece of stone, a marker of a past life, a past ruler, a past time. Can the dead truly divide the living? The shadow of history. Aurangzeb's name has always been a complex one in India's story. To some, he was a devout ruler, a symbol of faith and discipline. To others, he was an emperor who suppressed art, demolished temples, and enforced orthodoxy. But whichever side one takes, one fact remains. Aurangzeb lived in the 17th century, and we live in 2025. The India of today is not the India of Aurangzeb. We are not fighting over thrones or kingdoms. We are building satellites, startups, and a new digital future. And yet, somehow, creators, we are still haunted by the ghosts of old rulers. It is almost poetic how a man who died more than 300 years ago still has the power to divide minds today. But maybe the real question is, why do we allow him to? The Nagpur incident. When protests spread in Nagpur, a city that once symbolized India's industrial rise, it wasn't just about a tomb anymore. It was about identity. It was about belonging. And it was about the fragile thread that connects faith and nationalism in modern India. Reports told of clashes, of slogans, of flags raised in defiance. Temples and mosques stood silent witnesses as people forgot what those places were meant for: prayer, peace, connection. Creators, that's when I realized something. The fight wasn't about Aurangzeb the emperor anymore. It was about Aurangzeb the idea of division. Creators, an idea that still finds room to live in our algorithms, in our timelines, in our minds. A lesson from the digital world. When I look at this as someone from the world of technology, I see a pattern. The same one that exists in data. If you feed the wrong input, the output will always be biased. If your algorithm rewards anger, you will get chaos. If your conversations reward outrage, you will lose empathy. India, in many ways, is like the largest social network in the world. Billions of voices, countless opinions, and infinite stories. If we stop listening, if we stop filtering the truth, we risk turning our greatest strength, diversity, into our biggest weakness. We are not born divided. We are taught to be. And the first step toward unity is to unlearn division. Soft music swells, blending temple bells and azan again. Aurangzeb's tomb is not just a monument of the past. It is a mirror for the present. It asks us, what will we choose to remember? Creators, the pain of our ancestors or the progress of our children? When I was a child, my grandmother used to say, history never sleeps. It only changes clothes. At the time, creators, I didn't understand what she meant. But now I do. Because when I see the way people speak about Aurangzeb today, in rallies, in WhatsApp messages, in news debates, I realize that history hasn't disappeared. It has only changed its language. It no longer lives in textbooks, it lives in tweets, in trends, in viral hashtags. And sometimes, haters, that's even more powerful than swords. When history meets politics, every generation rewrites the past to fit its present. But when politics holds the pen, history turns into propaganda. The Nagpur incident was not just a conflict of communities, it was a clash of narratives. Each side wanted to claim the moral high ground, to say, our pain is older, creators, our anger is more justified. But pain doesn't come with a calendar, and anger has never built a bridge. Think about it. If our energy, our youth, and our media were all focused on solving poverty, healthcare, or education with the same passion that we fight over temples and tombs, imagine how far ahead India would already be. Instead, every few months, a new controversy rises. Creators. Sometimes it's a temple, sometimes a mosque, sometimes a film. But the emotion is always the same. Fear, pride, outrage. It's almost as if we've built an industry around division. Creators. At the algorithm of outrage, let me share something from my world. Technology. When an algorithm notices that anger keeps people online longer, it begins to recommend more anger, more conflict, creators, more extreme voices. And soon, what began as discussion becomes division. The same thing happens in society. When our conversations reward hate, hate multiplies. When leaders are celebrated for polarizing speeches, polarization becomes policy. And when we forget that every religion, every community, ultimately wants dignity and respect, we start living in echo chambers, not neighborhoods. But India was never meant to be an echo chamber. It was meant to be a chorus. Different voices, one harmony. Temples, mosque, and memories standing before the Aurangzeb Tomb, you don't just see stone. You see time, centuries of power, prayer, and paradox. The Mughal emperor who once ruled most of India lies buried in a simple grave, covered with mud and cloth, no gold, no marble, no monument to ego. And yet, around that simplicity, the world still fights. Creators, perhaps the greatest irony is this: Aurangzeb himself chose humility in death. He asked that no lavish tomb be built for him. He wanted to rest quietly, under the open sky. And yet, centuries later, his resting place has become a battlefield for pride. It tells us something profound, that the real fight is not about monuments, it's about meaning. The forgotten lessons of coexistence. Before Aurangzeb, there was Akbar, a ruler who tried to build bridges between faiths. After Aurangzeb, creators, came the British, who used division as a tool of control. And now, after independence, it is our turn, our generation's test, to see if we can rise above both extremes. Creators, every civilization faces such moments, moments when it must choose between memory and maturity, between repeating the past and rewriting it. The Aurangzeb Tomb controversy is not just about history, haters, it's about our readiness to move forward. Can we study our past without being trapped in it? Can we honor faith without turning it into fury? Can we learn from pain without passing it on? That is the real question. From conflict to curiosity, imagine if instead of mobs we had classrooms. Instead of rumors, we had research. Instead of anger, we had awareness. Creators. What if school students visited Aurangzeb's tomb not to protest, but to learn? To ask, why did he rule the way he did? What can we understand about power, faith, and responsibility from his era? History should be a mirror, not a weapon. And curiosity is the only antidote to hate. When I visit schools and universities in India and abroad, creators, I often meet students who say, "Sir, we want to change the world." And I always tell them, start by understanding it. Because you can never fix what you don't understand. And right now, creators, India needs understanding more than ever. The two Indias, there are two Indias today. One that scrolls through outrage, and one that builds quietly, works late, dreams of a better tomorrow. Creators, one India blames, the other creates. One shouts about religion, the other writes code, teaches children, plants trees. Both exist inside the same borders. Creators. But only one will decide what the next century looks like. If we want to honor the idea of India, the idea our constitution and our ancestors dreamed of, we must choose creation over conflict. That is what real nationalism means. Not shouting slogans, but shaping solutions. A future worth building. Standing at that tomb, I imagine the year 2050. A young Indian child, Muslim or Hindu, creators visiting the same site with curiosity, not anger. Maybe he carries a tablet instead of a torch. Maybe he opens an app that tells the story of Aurangzeb in 3D. And maybe, for the first time, he realizes this is not about sides, it's about stories. He might see how power once divided us, but he will also see how knowledge united us again. That is the India we must build. a nation where our future speaks louder than our fear. Soft instrumental music begins to rise, gentle tabla with digital synth. In every argument, there is an opportunity. In every controversy, a chance to create clarity. And that is what the Aurangzeb Tomb debate gives us. A mirror, a warning, and a window. A mirror to see our biases. Creators, a warning to avoid the mistakes of the past. And a window to imagine a new kind of patriotism. One built not on anger but on awareness. When the noise fades and the headlines disappear, creators, something remains? A quiet question? What kind of ancestors will we become? Because one day, hundreds of years from now, others will study us. Our tweets, our speeches, our protests, haters. They will ask what we built and what we broke. They will ask whether we chose peace or pride. And the story they tell will not depend on what Aurangzeb did, but on what we did after remembering him. Creators, the weight of memory. Every nation carries memories, some bright, some burning. For India, those memories are heavier because they stretch across thousands of years. We carry the memory of Buddha's compassion, Ashoka's remorse, Akbar's curiosity, Gandhi's courage. But we also carry the pain of partition, the silence of riots, the fear of difference. Creators, memory can guide us, or it can chain us, and that choice lies with us. When we let memory become revenge, we stay trapped. When we let memory become wisdom, we grow. And wisdom is what this moment asks for. The young India in Nagpur, a few days after the clashes, something remarkable happened. Students from 2 colleges, one Hindu majority and one Muslim majority, met for a peace walk. No cameras, haters, no speeches. Just a handful of young Indians walking silently, holding placards that said, "We will not inherit your hate." I think about that line often, because that is the sound of the real India, not the shouting, but the silence that chooses understanding over noise. There is a new India rising, in classrooms, in startups, creators in rural schools and digital labs. An India that speaks the language of technology, but still prays in many tongues. An India that wants to be proud of its past, but not poisoned by it. That India will define who we are. The role of technology cannot change hearts, but it can open them. When I see a viral video of hate get 1 million views, I also see an opportunity to build platforms that reward empathy, not outrage. Imagine an app that doesn't just show what's trending, but shows why it's trending, who benefits, creators, and what truth lies behind it. Imagine algorithms that learn to elevate peace stories as much as controversies, because information should enlighten, not enrage. India's digital future will not be measured by how fast we scroll, but by how deeply we understand. And maybe that's how the same internet that once spread division can now spread dialogue. Creators, lessons from the tomb. The Aurangzeb Tomb stands quietly today, no longer a site of violence, but still surrounded by questions. It reminds us that empires fall, rulers fade, and monuments crumble, but the emotions people attach to them can last forever. If Aurangzeb could speak today, perhaps he would ask, after 3 centuries, are you still fighting over me? And maybe we would finally answer, no, we have learned. Because learning is the only victory that time respects. From blame to belonging, it's easy to blame, to point fingers at leaders, communities, or history itself. But belonging requires courage. The courage to say, creators, I will not hate back. To be Indian today is to belong to everything. To the temple and the mosque, to the past and the future, to the melody of contradictions that somehow still form a song. Creators, we don't need to erase our differences, we just need to orchestrate them. That's what makes the idea of India so unique. Not uniformity, but unity. Not perfection, but participation. When we realize that, we stop guarding our identities like fortresses and start sharing them like gifts. The spark within. Sometimes people ask me, do you really believe India can overcome all this? And I smile, because I have seen it. I have seen Hindu and Muslim engineers working side by side in Bengaluru. I have seen interfaith couples build schools in Uttar Pradesh. I have seen volunteers from every religion serving food during floods and earthquakes. Creators, that is the India that doesn't make the news, but it makes the nation. Our challenge is not that division exists, it's that unity is quieter. But quiet does not mean weak. Sometimes, quiet is where revolutions begin. A message to the world is watching India. Creators, not just for its economy or technology, but for its ability to prove that 1 billion different hearts can still beat as one. If we can learn to live together, despite our past creators, we offer humanity a new model, not of tolerance, but of trust. Tolerance says, I'll put up with you. Trust says, I'll stand with you. The 21st century doesn't need more walls. It needs bridges. And India has always been a bridge between belief and reason, tradition and innovation, faith and science. We just have to remember that. The final lesson. So what does the Aurangzeb Tomb really teach us? That power fades. That religion can inspire or divide, depending on who holds the mic. Creators. That hate always burns the hand that throws it. And that forgiveness, though silent, is stronger than any sword. Perhaps the biggest lesson is this: we cannot change history, but we can change what history does to us. That is how civilizations evolve, not by erasing pain, but by transforming it. The India I see in India, where a mosque's call and a temple's bell are not rivals, but rhythms of the same song. Where our children learn not who to hate, but what to heal. Where our schools teach Mughal architecture and Vedic philosophy with equal respect. Where truth is not a weapon, but a window. I see an India that remembers Aurangzeb, not to argue, but to ask, what did he teach us about power, about faith, about ourselves? And I see a generation ready to answer with maturity, not memes. That is the India I believe in, and the India we can all build. Creators, the closing vision music rises softly, the blend of flute and electronic harmony. Someday, when the world speaks of this land, they won't speak of riots or rulers. Creators, they'll speak of resilience. They'll say, India is where difference became dialogue, where history became hope. That is not a dream. It is a decision, one we make every day, in how we speak, how we post, how we teach our children. The Aurangzeb Tomb may stand as a relic of division, but around it a new India is rising, one that understands that peace is not the absence of religion. Haters, it is the harmony of all of them. Her final pause, music fades to silence, and maybe when our grandchildren visit that same tomb one day, they won't see a grave. They'll see a reminder that the only empire worth building is the one that lives in our hearts.